As of March 31, 2019, according to statistics from the Ministry of Children and Family Development, MCFD in British Columbia, about 500 children experienced recurrence of maltreatment following reunification within a year and were returned to care. This means that 500 children in British Columbia were reunified with their families, returned to their homes, and within a year were returned to care because they were harmed again. The number of children who fall through the cracks with no protective intervention is likely higher, as, in my experience as a former foster parent with MCFD, parents who feel unsupported and afraid of what they perceive to be punitive separation with no real solutions avoid observation and encourage their children to do the same. Therefore, we know that hundreds more children in British Columbia are at risk. This is not just that there were about 500 children documented repeatedly harmed and returned to care in 1 year. This is an annual trend. So every year, thousands of children in British Columbia are at risk. This is a public health crisis. My name is Adia Lewis. I live in the township of Langley in Aldergrove. I used to be a foster parent with the Ministry of Children and Family Development. I have since begun to foster families instead of only fostering children to help close the gap of vulnerability through which so many of our families have fallen, and to help ease the load of our overburdened government, which cannot do the work of raising and providing safe homes for our struggling children and their families. What does fostering families mean? A vulnerable single mother and her children live in our home together in a safe, protective setting. Parents are assessed and seen to be safe to be housed with their children. Sometimes MCFD has been previously involved, and in other situations there has been no MCFD involvement. Each family faces housing instability. We foster one family at a time. I have been working full-time as the host parent in our pilot home for the last 2.5 years without being paid or funded, and all operating costs have come from my pocket, with several instances of assistance from a few supportive friends and from the organizations Acts of Kindness and Life app, who operate in the Langley and Fort Langley communities when they were able to assist. The great need for this service became glaringly apparent to me when I worked as a foster parent with MCFD. In his December 2015 report on the review of the Ministry of Children and Family, ordered by the BC government in August of 2015, Bob Plecas shares my concern. Bob Plecas was first hired by the BC government in 1997 to implement the recommendations of the Gove report, and he was again hired 18 years later to investigate the areas that needed improvement after another crisis with the JP and her 4 children. Mr. Plecas shares the view that government is being asked to do a job that they cannot do, and though they do their best, families are still at great risk. Children particularly are still at great risk. He shares this fact on page 11 of the summary of the Plecas report of December 4, 2015. In this report, Mr. Plecas notes that children are still as vulnerable today as they were 18 years ago when he was hired by the government then to implement the recommendations of the Gove report. Mr. Plecas says in his report that the government is failing to protect BC's children because they are trying to do the job that used to be done by extended family and the community. But what is the Gove report, you might ask? In July of 1992, 5-year-old Matthew Vaudreuil was killed by his mother, Verna. Verna had been raised as a child in care herself, from 8 years old until 19 years old when she aged out of foster care. Judge Gove notes in his report that social workers knew that Verna was unable to support herself in the community. The government had removed her from her unsafe home environment, but did not have the budget or the manpower to work on properly helping Verna to heal from the difficult experiences that had affected her brain and her mental and emotional health in early childhood. And so, when Verna, shortly after leaving care, had a baby whom she loved and named Matthew, social workers and other public health officials stepped in to try and help her care for Matthew. Altogether, more than 20 professionals were involved in Verna and Matthew's lives. And Verna's situation is not uncommon. Many of our children age out of foster care at 19 years old and have no real present consistent family support, and they're not ready to deal with everyday life. But they continue to grow, they have children, they have families, and then we end up with a cycle of children going through the foster care system and harmed as their parents had been. So though they were able to support them to some degree, the government still did not have the budget or the manpower to provide the kind of love and healing that Verna and Matthew needed. And in a moment of complete overwhelm, without clear and rational thought, Verna took action that cost Matthew his life. Both Judge Gove and Mr. Plecas are clear. The government cannot be the village which raises children. This is a community responsibility. Their findings support my findings in daily life as a foster parent. Social workers do their best, and they are both harmed and empowered by the child protection system because they are under severe mental and emotional strain as they attempt to make the best possible decision to ensure children's safety. But they, who face these agonizing decisions daily, cannot give BC's children the best chance at a healthy, happy life. This is a community responsibility. Social workers are trying to do an impossible job. Having experienced this firsthand as a foster parent, I and 4 other women in the community have incorporated a nonprofit organization, I Am With You Fellowship, which fosters families in the Integrated Family Connection Program, and otherwise we support single mothers in our community and their families. In 2.5 years, we have been a safe, protective space for 4 families who have then been able to launch on their own, fully surrounded by community support and resources available in the community, and who are families who are not then traumatized by the thought of separation by MCFD, as is the case in families who are a part of the MCFD child protection system and return home. And this is my personal experience as a foster parent. We were also home to a 5th family in partnership with a social worker on the MCFD Guildford interdisciplinary team, as that team tried to create the best case scenario for reunification for a mother and her 2 young children. All of our families face housing difficulties. We urgently need your help to meet costs to be able to keep this pilot home open while we go through the process of applying for grants and other sources of funding, as the repeated email response from the Premier and ministers of the Ministry of Children and Family Development state that they do not have funding to support fostering families together. Our funds are depleted, and we need $6,000 immediately to keep the home open for the next 2 months while we work on raising a minimum of $50,000 just for the basic operating cost of renting the house and providing very basic food that provides the same safe home base for struggling families. I have done everything that I can do. I and my board have done everything that we can do to fund this initiative, which is so desperately needed in British Columbia. Funds can be donated through e-transfer at 778-245-9762 or to email adia.iamwithyoufellowship@gmail.com. That is, funds can be donated through e-transfer at 778-245-9762 or to email adia.iamwithyoufellowship@gmail.com. We are also looking for other families who are willing to foster families. We connect you with professionals in the community who offer trauma-informed training, as I have gone through much trauma-informed training with psychologists and continue to do that so that we can properly support families. We don't train families. We simply offer a protective home where families can safely be, and then we connect them to resources in the community where they can find healing and support, Work BC, to get stable employment. We attach them to counselors and recommend that they go to counselors so that they can deal with the traumatic experiences that have influenced their lives. And we help them get attached to a GP so that they can have consistent medical care. We do whatever we can to help them to find the proper resources in the community while they have a protective, safe home base surrounding them. That is what we do. Our community can be a beacon of light to the world to show what wonderful things can happen when friends and neighbors work together. We can do this because we care, and not one child's suffering is acceptable. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you are open to partnering with us at this point in time through donating funds to help us stay open, and by looking at more information about being a host family for one of our struggling families in British Columbia. We can, because we care. Thank you.